Denny Hamlin says on his podcast that Joe Gibbs tried to keep Kyle Busch. John Nemechek could be a potential replacement candidate for Kevin Harvick for 2024. And Kyle Larson will run 2 Indianapolis 500s. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports story discussed today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to start by talking about Dakota Xfinity Series race. As their title sponsor has been revealed, it's going to be called the Pit Boss 250. I'm pretty sure last year's Xfinity Series race is called the Pit Boss 250, so I think it's the same sponsor from last year's. But glad to see that they have the sponsor returning for 2023. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Hair Club. As Hair Club is getting more involved in racing and they plan to work with Joe Logano and Frankie Muniz going forward. Now, Joe Logano has worked with Hair Club to basically get his hair back, and Frankie Muniz was sponsored by Hair Club at the ARCA opener at Daytona. Really excited to see the Hair Club is getting more involved in racing. They've been involved basically in like MLB and soccer and other forms of sports, but now they're focusing on racing. It's really exciting and really cool stuff, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Lego. As Adam Stern tweeted yesterday that Lego will start selling its 672-piece NASCAR Gen 7 model today for $49.99. This, of course, is a new model that NASCAR has a big partnership with Lego going into this year. So I think this is really great that they have a new partnership with Lego. It's really amazing. And for it to be $49.99, that's not that bad. I think the model looks really cool. And I'm looking forward to seeing that model. I might have to get it myself because it looks really exciting and looks amazing, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tom Brady. As something I did not expect for 2023, Tom Brady is actually going to be sponsoring the Jota team at Le Mans later this year with the Hertz branding. Tom Brady, of course, has been an F1 race in the past. Tom Brady, of course, the greatest football player and greatest NFL player in the history of the NFL. Tom Brady absolutely getting involved in racing is something I did not see on my 2023 bingo card. But for him to get involved in Le Mans, I think is really exciting stuff. Really cool. I love that he's getting involved in that form of racing as well. And I think it's big for the sport that he's getting involved in racing. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Bryce Harper. As it was announced yesterday that Bryce Harper is going to be the Grand Marshal for the Cup race at Las Vegas this weekend. Bryce Harper, one of the best MLB players currently playing the MLB and one of probably the greatest MLB players to ever brace the sport at the MLB, will give the command. Bryce Harper, I think, is from the Las Vegas area, so it's not a shock and surprise. I think he'll do a really good job. He'll probably give an energetic command, and I'm excited to see that he will be given the command for the Cup race at Las Vegas. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jackie Joyner-Kersee. As it was announced on Monday afternoon that Jackie Joyner-Kersee will be the Grand Marshal at Worldwide Technology Raceway. This is really exciting stuff. Jackie Joyner-Kersee is from around the area where Worldwide Technology Raceway is at, so it's not a shock or a surprise that she is going to be given the command. I think she'll do a pretty solid job. Really excited about that and glad to see that she'll get an opportunity to give the command for the Cup race at Worldwide Technology Raceway. Really exciting stuff and amazing to see for sure. In my honest opinion, it's really great stuff, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about lead changes. Now, Joseph Strigley always puts out some really interesting facts about a lot of the Cup, Xfinity Series, and Truck Series races. And something that he noted this past weekend is that in the first 2 Cup Series races, there have been 80 lead changes in the first 2 races. There is only one other year in NASCAR's 75-year history that has happened, and that is 2011. Obviously, in 2011, he had a lot of lead changes at Daytona because of the fact he had the tandem drafting. The fact that we've already had 2 straight races where we've had 80 lead changes altogether for both races is absolutely incredible and absolutely amazing overall. And just shows it in general currently at this moment. They were seeing a lot better racing itself at the moment. I think the racing has been really good, and I think the number of lead changes is going to continue to go up. I think it's really exciting stuff, really cool, and I'm excited to see that the ratings continue to go up because I think it's really awesome for the sport in general, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Josh Bilicki. As was reported by Joseph Strigley yesterday that Josh Bilicki will drive the 91 for DGM Racing this weekend at Las Vegas. Now, Josh Blicky was attempting to make the Daytona opener with the Ziegler sponsorship. Unfortunately, Josh Blicky failed to qualify, so he'll be attempting to make his first Xfinity Series start of the 2023 season. Now, the 91 car did have a pretty decent run with Ross Chastain, so I think they're better positioned in owners' points than they would have been if they did not make the show, because, again, everyone made it into the race except the 74 and the 99 cars. That being said, though, hopefully Josh Blicky can have a good run at Las Vegas if he's able to make the show, and we'll see what he'll be able to do, because I would love for Josh Blicky to have a strong run this weekend at Las Vegas if the car is up to snuff and is really, really fast. And now we're going ahead on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Max Gutierrez. As Allison Kanensky reported from Sportsnet that Max Gutierrez will drive the 22 for AM Racing this weekend at Las Vegas. This will be the first start that Max Gutierrez has made of the 2023 season. I would love for Max to have a really, really good run. We all know unfortunately happened to Max. It was really, really sad and it's a really unfortunate situation that happened to Max Gutierrez. So I wish Max the best of luck. I want him to have a good run. I think he's a really talented driver. He's shown his stuff before. He had a pretty good run from what I understand at Nashville. Was up front with the AM Racing team. And I think he'll have a decent shot to have a good run with AM Racing. So wish him the best of luck this weekend and hopefully have a really strong run this weekend with AM Racing. And now we're going ahead on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ross Chastain. As Nice Motorsports announced on Monday morning that Ross Chastain is going to drive the 41 for Nice Motorsports this weekend at Las Vegas. This will be the first of a couple starts that Ross Chastain is expected to make as he's one of the few drivers that will drive the 41 truck throughout the season. Ross Chastain will probably be a contender. He's been fast with this truck in the past. Remember, he won at Charlotte last year in the spring Charlotte race when they ran there near the Coke 600 weekend. I think Ross Chastain is going to be really, really fast. I think Nice Motorsports is going to give him really, really strong and really, really good equipment. And I think he'll have a very strong run this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Overall, I'm really excited to see what Ross Chastain can do this weekend at Las Vegas in the race that he's going to run. And now we're going ahead on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Race Day Revival. As we've already talked a little bit about Race Day Revival, that is coming back to Raw Technology this year. But it was also announced on Monday early afternoon that Kenny Walsh and John Roberts once again are going to be back for another Race Day Revival at Bristol Dirt in late March and early April. This is really, really awesome that they're bringing this back. I remember back in the day when they used to do Racetrack Revival or the Race Day all the time when they had John Roberts, Kenny Walsh, Jimmy Spencer up on the stand. And they're bringing that back once again. It'll be the first time, at least for now, that they are going to run it. Maybe they'll run it a little more later down the road. But I think this is really exciting. I was at it last year at Worldwide Technology Raceway, and I really enjoyed what they were able to put on. It was a great show overall. They brought a lot of great drivers and a lot of great people from the St. Louis area especially. And overall, I think it's really great that they're going to be continuing to bring it back. I wish they would televise it on Fox. I think that's how they should televise it. Get John Roberts and Kenny Walsh to be part of the Fox broadcast because in general, having that racetrack and Race Day Revival back would really, 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 in my opinion, would really help the sport grow in a big, big way. So overall, this is really, really awesome to see. Very happy that they're bringing this back, and I think it's a great decision overall that they're bringing this back. In my honest opinion, I think it's really awesome and really, really great that they're bringing it back, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Joey Logano. Now, Joey Logano, of course, does his show on the morning drive, basically talk on a TMD and basically his show Behind the Wheel. He talked about Tony Stewart in a story he had around Tony Stewart. Now, Joey Logano talks about when he was 8 years old, he basically went up to talk to Tony Stewart. But Tony Stewart, unfortunately, did not stop to give Joey Logano his autograph, and basically, he was not the most happy about that. Then it was reported that 10 years later, he's driving the number 8 car, the number 20 car in 2009 in the age of 18 years old. Now, Joey Logano is not bitter about that, but what he's learned is to stop for every fan and basically give every fan an autograph that wants an autograph. I get Tony Stewart's probably busy, though, at that time in 2007 or whatever year it was, like in the early 2000s. I think in general, though, it's just a funny story, and Logano had a lot of interesting sound bites from this week, and then we may react to later this week. But in all seriousness and all honesty, it's such an interesting story that Joey Logano would go on to replace Tony Stewart in 2009 when Tony went over to his own team at Stewart Haas Racing. And in general, they've had a history in the past, and it's very interesting overall what happened there. So interesting story and crazy to think how it all kind of unfolded. How Joe Logano went over and drove for Joe Gibbs Racing, which was a very interesting thing. And now we're going ahead to on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Max McLaughlin. As it was announced yesterday that Max McLaughlin is going to make his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut later this year at Watkins Glen, driving the number 96 for FRS Racing. Now, for those who don't know about FRS Racing is a new organization that's coming in from Colin Fern after Brandonville Motorsports, which is no longer a team in this series. Colin Fern basically brought up the Brandonville Motorsports organization and now has a new team called FRS Racing. Max McLaughlin, I think, is a very, very talented driver. He currently competes in the Super Dirt Car Series at this moment and has been very, very fast and extremely competitive in that. This is a great opportunity for Max McLaughlin, who always gets the best out of equipment, and in the past has actually won at Watkins Glen as well in the ARCA East Series back in 2018 or 2019, if I'm not mistaken. I think this is an amazing opportunity for him. I think he's going to get the best out of his equipment, and I think he's going to do excellent and a really good job this year with this team. I think he's going to do well. I hope he gets to run more races, and it's a really interesting choice. I did not think he would be the driver that was chosen. I thought maybe Brandon Brown would get chosen, but I found some stuff out about Brandon Brown, and let's just say about the situation between that I'm not going to get into. But the situation, it's very interesting that they decided to have Max McLaughlin come into play and come in. I think he'll do a really awesome job. I'm excited to see that he will be in there, and I'm really looking forward to see Max McLaughlin get the opportunity to race in the Xfinity Series. I think it's really exciting stuff, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead to on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Garage 56. As Garage 56 has accepted their invitation to go to the Le Mans 24 Hours, and their number for the race has been officially revealed. The number they're going to run is the number 24. Not a shock they're using that number, considering the number 24 has a long-term and a great history in the world of racing, especially in NASCAR, and with Hendrick Motorsports being, I believe, the most successful winning number in Hendrick Motorsports history. So it makes a lot of sense for the number 24 to come in and be the number. This car, of course, will be driven by Jimmy Johnson, Mike Rockefeller, and Jetson Saban, who's also has recently shown some interest and might want to race in NASCAR and maybe make some road course starts in the foreseeable future. I really am excited for this Garage 56 entry. There's some interesting tech spec that I'm not going to get into. If you've seen other YouTubers talk about it, you probably will understand what I'm talking about. But overall, with the Garage 56 entry, I'm excited to see this. It's a new innovation. They're bringing in a NASCAR Cup Series car, the next-gen car, over there. I think it's very exciting, and I'm looking forward to see that this car is going to be out there. And to see that they're running the legendary number 24 car, it absolutely makes a ton of sense and a lot of sense that they're bringing the number 24 out. I love that they're doing that. It's really amazing, really exciting, and I'm happy to see that they've got the number 24 as a number for the Garage 56 entry overall, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead to on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Richard Childress. Now, Richard Childress was on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio yesterday or on Monday evening, and Richard Childress went on to speak about Kyle Busch. And he went to speak on Kyle Busch and praise Kyle Busch and basically almost compared him a little bit to Dale Sr. as well on that SiriusXM NASCAR radio broadcast. He basically went on to praise him, talk about how Kyle Busch can read every racetrack, and give a lot of great feedback overall to the teams itself. I think when you look at Kyle Busch and what he's already done with Rich Schultz Racing is absolutely amazing, and he's been extremely fast with Rich Schultz Racing so far this year. Already scored a win, got the first victory for Rich Schultz Racing, and I think in general, when you look at how successful Kyle Busch, I think, is going to be this year, I think Kyle Busch is going to be the most successful driver Richard Childress has had for sure since Kevin Harvick, but also I think that he will be winning a lot of races this year in all three respective series, and he's going to be running all three races this weekend, so I think he could overall sweep the weekend with the Chevy Brandy. Because, of course, he's the only driver to basically have swept it, which he's done that twice, both at Bristol in 2010 and 2017. But I think it's just so cool to see Richard Childress come out and praise Kyle Busch, and he's been doing that, and I'm really excited to see for the future. I think it's really exciting stuff overall, and I'm very happy to see that Richard was able to praise Kyle because Kyle's been extremely successful already at this point with this team, and I think he's going to continue to be extremely successful with this team long-term future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about groove tires. Now, we have a couple of things from the Action Detrimental podcast that Denny Hamel does that we're going to be talking about today. But the first thing is about groove tires. Yes, you heard that right. At about the 43-minute mark in this week's edition of the podcast, Denny Hamel talked about that NASCAR is actually exploring the possibility of running grooved tires. One of the reasons why they're talking about this is to basically make it more out of control and basically bring it back in the driver's hands, reduces some of the downforce in the car, and basically bringing it more out of control, making the racing hopefully a little bit better, especially on certain tracks. So we're going to get into here really shortly. Now, groove tires is nothing new to racing. They've been done in Formula One in the past. Fans were not the biggest fan of it, to be honest. From what I understand, a lot of Formula One fans were not the biggest fan of them running groove tires. I'm very intrigued to see if this does end up happening. I'm going to be very intrigued to see how successful it actually does end up becoming, how much success it will be. It will be very interesting to see if they actually go ahead and do bring groove tires in, because it'd be very interesting to see if it would be successful, if people would love it, or people would hate it. Because I know some, like I said, some F1 fans were not the happiest overall with the potential possibility. And I know that they ran groove tires back in Formula 1. I think it was a few years ago they did that. And it could be implemented as early as this year. It is very possible, but I can't confirm that. So we'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to that in general. But it's very interesting that groove tires are going to be potentially run. And it could be something to watch for going down the road in the foreseeable future. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Alex Bowman. Now, Austin Knetsky from Sportsnet put out a very interesting article around Alex Bowman. And Alex Bowman basically revealed some interesting things about the Hendrick Motorsports contract extension that he just got. Now, Alex Bowman has signed a multi-year contract extension with Hendrick Motorsports that goes through the 2026 season, and Ally has signed an extension with Hendrick Motorsports through the 2028 season. So it's very possible that Alex Bowman could get an extension as far as 2028 down the road. Now, what Alex Bowman also revealed is the fact that he was not worried, and this contract had been done for a long time, and said that the people on Twitter were more worried about Alex Bowman, which is really funny, calling out the people on Twitter, which I'm on Twitter, by the way, but basically calling out people on Twitter that saying, oh, Alex Bowman's going to be gone, he's going to be leaving the organization, and Bowman saying, nope, I'm going to be here for the long term, and I've got a contract for as long as Kyle Larson and 1 year less than Chase Elliott. Look, I thought Alex Bowman was coming back to Hendrick Motorsports. I thought there was no chance he was going to be leaving Hendrick, unless, of course, he went to SHR. But I think that he wanted to stay there, and Ally has a long-term commitment. I expected Bowman to come back, and I think that Hendrick Motorsports made the correct and the right decision on keeping Alex Bowman, in my honest opinion. I think it's going to work really well wonders for Hendrick Motorsports. And Hendrick is set up for the long-term future, well, at least for the near future, because William Byron now is the next driver. He's the most likely on the chopping block right now, which he only goes through 2025. Byron is going to have to step it up to the plate and really start performing, because Kyle Larson's already won a lot of races. Chase Elliott and championships, same with Chase Elliott. Bowman's won quite a few races. It's William Byron's turn now to really step up to the plate and really take that next step, because he's a driver right now that could be on the chopping block in the next few years if he doesn't really step up to the plate. So hopefully William Byron can do that, and we can see Hendrick Motorsports become a really successful team long-term, because I really want to see Hendrick Motorsports become and continue to be the top dog team that they've been, and they're just set up for the long-term future with their sponsorship as well, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Auto Club TV ratings from this past weekend. Now, it's reported by Adam Stern and multiple different reporters that Fox earned a 2.48 rating and 4.315 million viewers for Sunday's NASCAR Cup race at Auto Club. That is down a tick from 2.61 rating and 4.57 million from last year. Now, what's very interesting about this is we've kind of gotten a house share number, and apparently that was up about 9 or 10% as well. So the share was up, but less people were watching TV this year, but basically the house share was up. Now, I'm going to have a little bit of a theory that I'm going to talk about here in the future, but this is not good to see that for the second week in a row, ratings are down. And it's down by a pretty big chunk as well, quintessentially, that is down by nearly about 10%. The fact seeing the ratings go down in general really isn't always overall the greatest thing in the world. Seeing ratings go down, you don't want them to go down. You want them to go up. Now, one thing interesting is that I believe that the 18 to 49 demographic was about 811,000 viewers, which is less than I believe the WWE, if I'm not mistaken. Also, I think there was another sport. I think it was maybe NCAA or something along those lines. Granted, NASCAR did win the weekend with its ratings, but only about 20% in that demographic that NASCAR is really targeting, which isn't the greatest thing. It isn't great to see that you don't have a really high rating in that, because NASCAR is targeting that 18 to 49 demographic, and they want to get that 18 to 49 demographic if they're going to be willing to succeed and wanting to succeed long term. Overall, though, I wish the number was up just a little bit, a little more than this. It's a little disappointing the number can't be up just a little bit more than what we got at the moment, but it isn't a shock or a surprise that TV ratings are down just a little bit. And in my opinion, I think it's an interesting decision in a sense that they basically ratings are down just a little bit. So it's disappointing, but it is what it is, and hopefully TV ratings go up in the future, and we'll talk about why I think the ratings are down just a little bit here in just a second. And now we're going ahead to on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Fox Sports. And we're talking about their TV coverage. Now, like I said in the TV ratings portion of the episode, I want to talk about TV coverage for Fox. Look, we talk about the TV coverage a lot with Fox Sports, and I'm very critical of Fox Sports TV coverage. And the reason being is because the TV coverage for Fox has not been really good, in my opinion. Now, I will say one thing to give credit to Fox. There were less commercials this time around than the Daytona 500 because they didn't have to sell as much ad space, which I think is a good thing overall, that there were less full-screen commercials. And I feel like there were more side-by-side commercials than full-screen commercials. But now we got other issues at Fox that we need to talk about. Number one, the camera shots and the camera quality. Camera shots are all over the place. They have been really, really bad with Fox. But the big thing I want to talk about is the production and the quality of the people up in the booth. My God, the Fox Sports booth is absolutely horrendous and is not good in my opinion. And I don't think it's just one person. I see people going after Clint Boyer, and Clint Boyer is part of the blame for sure. But I think in general, the Fox booth itself right now is just not up to par. There's no energy in the booth right now. You can't have Mike Joy carrying it. You can't have one person talking. You've got to have more energy in the booth and make it more exciting and make it more authentic. You got to basically have a little more fun. It's like a Sunday afternoon casual, like you're at a golf tournament. This is NASCAR racing. You got to be more exciting and make it authentic. You can't be over the top like Clint Boyer used to be, but you can't be so quiet that it sounds like you're watching a golf broadcast. You've got to make the broadcasts a lot better, in my opinion, and you got to make them a lot more better. It's just right now, Fox's broadcast at this particular moment, they're not up to par and are not really good right now, and they've got to change it and get better, because right now it's just not fun to watch these Fox broadcasts. It's been bad from the start. I thought the Busch Clash broadcast was all overall okay, but the other two races haven't been great, and it's a shame because the pre-race coverage has been on top. They've been really good with the pre-race coverage, and they've had moments where they're great. But when the Xfinity Series broadcast has better coverage and the truck broadcast has better coverage than the Cup broadcast, that's a major problem, and Fox needs to change it and bring more authenticity and energy into it. And if they can do that, they're going to be on top of the game because they've got a lot of potential to do this. But right now, in my opinion, they're just not on top of their game. They need to get it sorted out, and they need to be better because, in my opinion, it's not good to watch these broadcasts at the moment. In fact, it's really frustrating to watch these broadcasts currently at the moment. Hopefully, they get changes for the better, and it can be better for the long-term future overall, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Auto Club Speedway. Now, Auto Club Speedway this past weekend, a couple days ago, just had their final NASCAR Cup Series race as of now on the 2-mile configuration. And we have some interesting little insight around Auto Club Speedway once again. Now, President Dave Allen on a potential new short track being built there. He says, I'm hopeful that we get to a point here in the near future, sometime this year, there's going to be more information coming out and a timeline established. And it sounds like from what he is saying, they still don't have a set plan in stone for Auto Club Speedway. The fact that right now they don't have a set in stone plan for Auto Club Speedway generally and genuinely really concerns me about the future. There's, of course, not going to be a NASCAR Cup Series race or any racing on the Auto Club track in 2024. Earliest we could get racing Auto Club is 2025, and honestly, that it might be even a stretch. We might not even get racing for at least the next few years, and there's a lot of concern. And the plans continue changing. They don't have a set-in-stone plan. They continue to change plans. It was going from a 0.5 mile track, a half-mile track, up to a 2/3 mile track now, making it a little bit longer. And they've lost a lot of the land they're going to use. Granted, I think it's going into another company that's going to be around the Auto Club area that is working on Auto Club Speedway. So that's at least good. But I am worried about the long-term future of Auto Club because this could get scrapped in general, and Auto Club might be gone. So we may have just seen the final races at Auto Club, and I really hope this isn't the case. I really do hope that they can figure out a plan, and they can have a plan set in stone. But like I said, I'm very concerned. It makes me really nervous, the fact that they don't have a set-in-stone plan for Auto Club currently at the moment. It's not good news to hear, and it's just they need to have a plan set in stone for Auto Club. And the fact that they don't have a plan set in stone, like I said and mentioned, really concerns me for the long-term future. So I really do hope they can get a plan set in stone for the long-term future. But like I said, and like I mentioned, I am concerned that there is potential problems that could come into play if they can't get a plan set in stone. So I really hope they can get a plan set in stone, but I am genuinely really worried about the future of Auto Club Speedway and the long-term future of the track currently at the moment. Hope they can get a plan done, but I'm really, really worried that there might not be a long-term future, and it concerns me in a pretty big way overall, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead to move on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kurt Busch once again. Now, as of recently, over the last 2 weeks, we've talked about Kurt Busch quite a bit. I've talked about, will Kurt Busch make a return to NASCAR? Well, according to Associated Press article, I think by Jenna Fryer, Kurt Busch at this point, as we get to week 3 of the year, that he's still at this point not cleared to race at the moment. He has vowed to compete once again, though, whether it is in the Cup Series or another racing series, he would like to compete once again. He also revealed that go-karts and simulators have been fine for him. He's been doing that, and the go-kart simulators have been great. But he says that the movement and headrest still are a massive, massive issue for him, and he's in that final stage of trying to get back. I think we all can agree at this point that we want Kurt Busch to come back, and we're hoping that he comes back this year because, like I said, he has vowed that he does want to come back and compete once again. But I will say this, and like I've already said today, I am worried about Kurt Busch if he will come back and be as competitive. Because like I said here, I don't think Kurt Busch will be as competitive because he has not been a Cup car now for nearly a year. Because the last time Kurt Busch competed was at Pocono in July. And we're coming up to the 8-month period now. And Kurt is still not clear at this point, which makes me really nervous about Kurt Busch's potential return. There's even rumors he might drive for another team at this point if he does race, though. He is enjoying his role as a consulting role at 2311 Racing. Now, he doesn't plan to become an owner at 2311 Racing. He did confirm that. But it would be very interesting to see if whatever happens with Kurt Busch, if he ever became an owner, that would be really, really exciting stuff. When it comes to Kurt Busch, I think he needs to continue to focus on his health, continue to get better so he can come back to racing and be as competitive. So I hope Kurt Busch can make a recovery and he can make a return. At this point, I don't know what the long-term future is for Kurt Busch, if he will be able to come back. I hope he is able to come back and be as competitive as he can be. I miss seeing Kurt Busch behind the wheel of a NASCAR Cup Series stock car, and hopefully Kurt Busch can compete with 2311 Racing or another team for that matter. We'll have to wait and see what happens. Hopefully Kurt Busch can get cleared in the future, and we'll see if Kurt Busch can race once again in the foreseeable future. Hopefully he's able to be cleared and he can race once again. And now we're going ahead to move on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the SRX. As the SRX yesterday announced multiple drivers that will be joining the SRX for 2023, and there were quite a bit. So they announced that Paul Tracy, Marco Andretti, and Ryan Hunter-Reay are going to be competing for the full SRX championship this year. They also announced that Tony Kanaan will compete in 3 of the 6 SRX races for this year, that being at Stafford, Thunder Road, and Eldora. And they also announced that Joseph Newgarden will compete at Motor Mile. That means that most of the field is already set in stone, and 4 of the 6 races that they're running this year have full fields at this moment. They join a long list of drivers that are competing in the SRX this season. This includes Haley Deegan, Tony Stewart, Kenny Walsh will compete in 1 race, Kyle Busch is going to be competing in the SRX, Kevin Harvick will be competing in the SRX, Ryan Newman, Julio Castroneves, Brad Keselowski, Clint Boyer as well, and other drivers that have already been announced will be competing in the SRX as well. This year's SRX season is absolutely being stacked up to be one of the most successful SRX seasons that we have seen in a very stacked field going in this year. There are still few potential drivers that could be in the SRX this year. There's only 2 races, like I mentioned, that don't have full fields at this moment set, and that still need to have drivers that need to be confirmed for that. But the SRX is already way ahead of their schedule because their season does not start in July, and the fact that they almost have their whole fields set in stone for these races, I think is really exciting stuff, and it gets me potentially to get an SRX driver lineup video out here in the future as well. But that being said, I love the fact that there continue to be big moves happening with the SRX. I wonder what other drivers they could end up getting. Maybe they get Kyle Larson somehow. Maybe they get Chase Elliott once again, and maybe Ryan Blaney comes back, because I would love for Kyle Larson to get an opportunity to race in the SRX, which we're going to talk about him here very, very shortly. But I think in general, the SRX is really setting themselves up for a really great future going into this year, and I think this could end up being the most successful and also the most fun SRX season that we've had up to this point as well. And I think it's going to be fun to watch. Also, I think Bobby Labonte maybe is in it as well, if I'm not mistaken. But overall, excited to see that the SRX is getting closer and closer to have everything set in stone. It's going to be fun. It's going to be really exciting. And I'm looking forward to this year's upcoming SRX season because I think it's going to be fun and fantastic to watch overall, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about short tracks and road courses, as their 2023 package for most of those races has been officially revealed, and they have announced an updated package for those types of tracks. The only 2 tracks will not be part of this are Bristol and Dover. The big reason is because I think it's saving money, and also because of the fact of the loads on the tires is a big reason why. So, it is going to be a 2-inch spoiler, and it's going to be removal of 3 diffuser strings and engine panel strings. The hope is that it will reduce 30% of the reduction in downforce. This, in my opinion, is an absolutely really great change, in my opinion, the fact that they have made these changes. And here is why. The hope is when they do this is it can create way better racing on those types of tracks. Last year on the short tracks and road courses, besides a few, the racing itself was really, really off, and it was not really, really good in my opinion, and it wasn't really, really fun to watch overall. So the hope with this move is that the racing itself can be a lot better at those types of racetracks, because with the reduction of downforce, you're going to have cars getting loose on the track, and it's going to create the potential possibility of better opportunity to pass, because one of the issues with the next-gen car on the short tracks and road courses last year, that it was extremely difficult to pass, and you had to set up positions, and there were a lot of areas where you could pass on the racetrack, and especially at Martinsville, where that racing was not very good in my opinion last year. This should help that racetrack. I wish that Bristol and Dover would have gotten an opportunity to be part of that, but I think the loads on the tires, like I mentioned, was a big factor why they decided to go against doing that. However, I think this is a really awesome and a massive positive change for NASCAR, because I think it is going to create better racing on those types of tracks. And I think, like I said, you're going to get better racing, better product on the track. And I think this is a great change. I think it's going to help the racing itself, especially when we go to North Wilkesboro, which a lot of people are anticipating that race in May. It will help Richmond, which I think those did actually produce some good racing, but I wish it would be a little better. Hopefully, with the changes they brought on the next-gen car, it continues to create better and better product on the track. And I think it hopefully will. We're going to be going to Phoenix in a few weeks. And also needs to be noted that there is going to be a 50-minute practice session on Friday for the Cup Series to basically do a little bit of test, see how the drivers feel. They did a test number at Phoenix, and they really thought that the 2-inch spoiler that it was going to be a lot better, which hopefully it will be a lot better for the drivers as well. They also will be bringing the mufflers, of course, at the Chicago Street Course, which we know that's coming. But overall, I think this is really, really great change. I'm happy that NASCAR did this because, like I mentioned and said here, I think the fact that they've done this is a really, really positive for the sport in general, and I'm very excited to see that they have done this because I think this is a great and positive change for NASCAR in general, and I'm happy to see that they've gone ahead and made some changes to the short track product because I think it's going to improve the short track product overall, and I think it's going to really help the racing at those types of tracks going into the year. This is a great change overall, and happy to say that they have made these changes for 2023 on the short tracks and road courses besides Dover and Bristol, which they should have been part of that change, but I digress. But I think overall this is a massive positive changes for both of those types of tracks going into this season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson. Now, we already knew that Kyle Larson was going to be competing in the 2024 Indianapolis 500. But one thing that's interesting, and Jenna Fryer noted in one of her tweets, is that she uncovered another nugget, is that Kyle Larson is actually going to compete in back-to-back Indianapolis 500s. Will also, of course, be in the 2024 Indy 500, but he's also going to compete in the 2025 Indianapolis 500 with Aaron McLaren SP in that number 5 car, or whatever number they chose. I think it was the number 6 with Aaron McLaren going into next year. And also she knows that he will be testing this year as well, will be part of those IndyCar tests that do happen at the Indy tests in April. He will be part of those tests. So we don't just get to see Kyle Larson run one Indianapolis 500. We get to see Kyle Larson compete in 2 Indianapolis 500s. That is going to be really, really fun and really, really exciting, because I think Kyle Larson right now is one of the greatest race car drivers we've seen come in the racing world, especially in the last few years. And I think if there's anybody who can go out and win the Indianapolis 500, it is Kyle Larson. And the fact he's going to be getting testing to do not 1 but 2 Indy 500s, it's going to be really, really fun to watch, and I'm extremely looking forward to it, because everything that Kyle Larson has gotten into, he has gone up to speed really, really quickly. He's won dirt car races, sprint car races, dirt late model races, got into those and started winning instantly. He's won a Cup Series championship. He's won a Rolex 24, and now he gets an opportunity to compete and not just do 1 Indianapolis 500, but 2 Indianapolis 500s, and I think he's going to be extremely competitive from the get-go really, really quickly. And I think that you would not surprise or shock me if he wins both of those Indy 500s. I'm not saying he's going to instantly win, but with the team he's competing with Aaron McLaren, they were one of the fastest teams in 2022 in the race, with Chip Ganassi being up there as well, competing with that team. But I really, truly do believe that Kyle Larson is going to have a very good and a very strong shot and a great chance at winning that. So I think he's going to be very, very fast. I'm looking forward to seeing Kyle Larson compete in the Indy 500 in 2024 and 2025. He is one of my favorite drivers. In fact, my current favorite driver in the NASCAR Cup Series at the moment. And to see my favorite driver, like my other old favorite driver being Tony Stewart, getting an opportunity to compete this year in this series is going to be in the Indy 500 next year is going to be really, really fun. I would love for him to run an IndyCar race this year. I think it would make a lot of sense for him to get an opportunity to run an Indy race this year, and maybe he runs the Indy NASCAR double. I would love for him to do the Indy double if they can find a way to do it, because I think it'd make a lot of sense for him to get some experience. I know this is different than driving IndyCar on an oval, but I think it's a great decision. He's getting the opportunity to do it. It's going to make racing really, really fun for him to come out, and for him to run the Indy 500 this year is really exciting. I'm looking next year, I should say, in 2025 as well. I'm really looking forward to that. I think it's going to be really fun for me as a fan. I'm excited about it. I'm really looking forward to it, and I cannot wait to see Kyle Larson get the opportunity to compete in the Indy 500 next year and in 2025 as well. It's going to be fun. I'm excited about it, and I'm looking forward to see Kyle Larson get the opportunity to compete in the Indianapolis 500 for 2 years in 2024 and also 2025 as well. I'm excited about it. Now we're going to jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about John Hunter Nemechek and the potential of going to the 4 car for Stewart Haas Racing in 2024. Now, obviously, there's a big sweepstakes on who is going to be driving the 4 car for 2024. We've already talked about some potential candidates for the 4 car for 2024. We've talked about maybe Ricky Stenhouse Jr. We've talked about maybe a couple other drivers. But now John Hunter Nemechek's name has been brought up into conversations as well. Now, according to Austin Kensky and Jordan Bianchi, there is not a clear favorite right now for that 4 car at this moment for 2024. But John Hunter Nemechek is a candidate that could be a potential possibility to drive the number 4 car in 2024. This is very, very interesting, because this is not the first time that John Hunter Nemechek's name has been mentioned for a possibility of driving for Stewart Haas Racing. Remember, last year, if I'm not mistaken, it was on Stacking Pennies podcast that Corey LaJoie had mentioned multiple drivers, including Brian Priest and John Hunter Nemechek. Because remember, at the time when that happened, right at the point, Eric Almirola was going to retire at the end of 2022. But then Eric Almirola made a decision to return for 2023 and maybe 2024, but also it's 50-50 for Eric Almirola currently at the moment. But then I think about it for a second, like, well, why is John Hunter Nemechek's name in the questions? But then I remember he is sponsored by Mobil 1. Mobil 1 is a big partner of Stewart Haas Racing and also the SHR brand. Yes, they are a Toyota brand, but they have sponsorship and funding. But the other big question is what is going to happen with Busch, because Busch Beer is going to be a major factor on who will get that number 4 car, because Busch's future is in question, because Busch Beer is not just a Stewart Haas racing partner, it's a Kevin Harvick partner. So is Busch Beer going to return in 2024 or go sponsor another driver, like perhaps maybe Kyle Busch? It is possible that Busch may leave SHR in general and focus on sponsoring another driver at a respective team. So if Busch leaves, they're going to have to find a driver that brings sponsorship and funding, which is where John Hunter Nemechek comes into play, because John Hunter does have fire alarm solutions and also Vaughn systems as well. That could be a potential possibility of a sponsor for John Hunter Nemechek. And I think John Hunter would be a very solid candidate for Stewart Haas Racing. I think John Hunter is a very talented driver. He's already won a race with Joe Gibbs Racing this year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. And I think if I look at some of the drivers that would be really great candidates in the future for Ford, bringing John Hunter Nemechek into the fold for Ford would be a really great decision for Ford, because I think he would be able to get the best out of that equipment. I think he's a very talented driver. He's a really great driver. He nearly won the truck championship last year. I believe almost made the Final Four. He didn't make the Final Four, unfortunately. But he's a driver who can get the best out of equipment and win races. And, of course, we'll be going for a second straight win in the Xfinity Series this weekend, though. He's going to have to compete against his former Boston Truck Series, Kyle Busch, for that. But John Hunter is a very talented driver, and I think Toyota needs to be looking at trying to replace him. Now, also, John Hunter could potentially also go up to the Cup Series and drive for Joe Gibbs Racing if one of those drivers, like, say, Denny Hamlin leaves that team to go to his own team, or Mark Truex Jr. does decide to retire. But MTJ's future is a little bit in question. He could come back next year, but also he could also return in 2024 as well. It's 50-50 at the moment for Martin Truex Jr., which we all thought was set in stone he was going to retire, but now it's 50-50 for Martin Truex Jr., and if he performs well, he might return in 2024. So the big question for John Hunter Nemechek is, will he stay in the Toyota stable or maybe go to Stewart Haas Racing? That's one thing we're going to be watching as well. But if he doesn't get chosen to go to Stewart Haas Racing, who could be other candidates? Well, obviously you've got drivers in the SHR camp, that being Cole Custer and Riley Herbst. Cole Custer wants to go back to Cup. We know he wants to go back to Cup, but it depends on his performance at Stewart Haas Racing and Xfinity this year. And then Riley Herbst, of course, does have that Monster Energy backing. And then you think about other drivers in that Ford camp. Hailie Deegan could be a possibility. I know that's crazy to say, but Hailie Deegan's got Monster Energy backing as well in other companies. We don't know what her truck is going to be for the weekend yet, but we know that she could be a potential possibility and a candidate as well. I think nothing is completely off the table at this point, but if I had to choose who I would love to see, I think between John Hunter Nemechek and Zane Smith, those two would be great drivers for the long-term future. The fact you don't have Ross Chastain or Alex Bowman is a possibility. Those are two drivers I would be looking at if I am Stewart Haas Racing. That being said, though, I hope one of those two get chosen. I think John Hunter would be a great candidate for Stewart Haas Racing. He's a really talented driver. I know Stenhouse's name has been in the conversation, but if I had to choose, it'd be between John Hunter Nemechek and Zane Smith for the 4 car. I would love for one of those two to get an opportunity, and they would deserve it. So we'll see what happens. I think John Hunter could go to the Cup Series next year. Will it be with the 4 in the 19 car? We're going to have to wait and see what happens. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Busch once again. Now, we've talked about Kyle Busch a lot over the last year, especially with the Joe Gibbs timeline. We know at this point that Kyle Busch is driving for Richard Childress Racing. And we've seen one side, and a lot of people kind of called out Joe Gibbs, saying, especially when Kyle Busch won with Richard Childress Racing this past weekend at Auto Club, a lot of people have been trying to call out Joe Gibbs Racing, say, see, we told you. Well, over the last 2 weeks, there's been more details that have kind of come out. And really, first it was on the Door Bumper Clear podcast. But Denny Hamlin, of course, drives for Joe Gibbs Racing. He kind of came out to defend Joe Gibbs in this situation. And Denny Hamlin says that Joe Gibbs wanted to keep Kyle Busch, but the offer would have caused Joe Gibbs Racing to cease to exist. Kyle Busch also turned down a really good offer from Joe Gibbs to return, and Kyle Busch budged. We know, and Kyle Busch says, with speaking to Tom Rinaldi, he basically said that Joe Gibbs actually offered him his own personal money for Kyle Busch to stay, but Kyle Busch's like, nah, I don't want to stay here. And I think Kyle Busch at the end wanted a change of scenery. Now, we don't know what that initial offer that Kyle Busch wanted is. We know it was a big amount of money because Kyle Busch wanted a lot of money at the time, but he felt undervalued and probably wanted a change of scenery. There were a lot of big factors why Kyle Busch left Joe Gibbs Racing. And I think 3 big factors caused it. First one was Mark Truex Jr. announcing he was going to return, because we thought Mark Truex Jr. was going to retire. When Mark Truex Jr. announced he was turning in 2023 and maybe in 2024 at this point as well, that was the first domino to fall. The second domino was Oracle. Oracle was a big sponsor that was potentially going to sponsor Kyle Busch at Joe Gibbs Racing, but unfortunately, that sponsorship fell through, and they did not budge, and they decided to unfortunately go ahead and leave. They were going to be a sponsor for Kyle, but they wanted to focus a lot on Red Bull and Red Bull Racing as well. And then Ty Gibbs. Ty Gibbs had a very, very dominant year in the Xfinity Series, and let's be honest, Ty Gibbs is a much cheaper driver than Kyle Busch. Plus, Ty Gibbs bring Monster Energy backing in sponsorship, while Kyle Busch didn't bring really any sponsorship at all. But do I agree with Denny Hamlin in a sense that Kyle Busch would have caused Joe Gibbs Racing to cease to exist? I don't think so. I think that they would have found a way. I don't agree with that essence because Denny Hamlin, let's be honest, is going to defend Joe Gibbs in a sense. I do think it's true, though, that Kyle Busch wanted a lot of money and Kyle Busch was given a good offer because Denny Hamlin's not the only one to say that. But I don't think that Kyle Busch would have caused Joe Gibbs Racing to cease to exist. But I do truthfully believe, at least in the beginning, that Joe Gibbs wanted to keep Kyle Busch around. But I think at the end, Kyle Busch wanted a change of scenery. And sometimes a change of scenery can be really good for a driver. Look what Kyle Busch did when he left Hendrick Motorsports. He only got 4 wins at Hendrick Motorsports in 2005, 2007. The first year he goes to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2008, Kyle Busch goes on to win 8 races and was an outside championship threat. He didn't have a good playoffs, but he ran really great that year regardless and got 2 championships for Toyota and won a lot of races with the Joe Gibbs Racing brand. And now he's going over to Chevy, bringing a lot of information over to Chevy, and I think he's going to make Chevy even faster than they already were. And Chevy's been already great to start the year, and they were great before Kyle Busch even came back over there. But he's going to do a lot of great things with the Joe Gibbs Racing brand going this year, and I think it's just exciting to see what Kyle Busch has already accomplished at Richard Childress Racing. But you think about everything Kyle Busch has accomplished at Joe Gibbs Racing, and we know Joe Gibbs wanted to keep Kyle Busch. It's no secret. They wanted Kyle Busch to stay around because Kyle Busch was so much successful for the team. But I think at the end, he wanted to change the scenery and wanted to go off and do his own thing and go to Rich Childress Racing. And he basically said that they were going to have to change his lifestyle driving for Rich Childress Racing because he definitely took a pay cut and he's been able to find sponsorship and funding. But how Joe Gibbs does it is that they do it for full season sponsors. But you look at Rich Childress Racing, they go for smaller, cheaper sponsorship, which I think is how the business model is going to change. You're not going to be able to find a full season sponsor normally now. Joe Gibbs is going to have to change up their sponsor model because that's the issue with FedEx now, and we don't know the long-term future for Denny Hamlin, at least at Joe Gibbs Racing, but at least we know he'll be with Toyota long-term. Mark Truex Jr.'s future is in question. It's not due to sponsorship and funding, but I think Toyota, with Kyle Busch going over there, they're going to have a rude awakening this year. They're going to have a little bit of struggle going into this year, seeing how they perform. I don't know how well they're going to perform going into this year, and I'm worried about the long-term future of Joe Gibbs Racing. They've got Christopher Bell over there, but how long is Christopher Bell going to be at Joe Gibbs Racing? You know, Christopher Bell, there's been people thinking he would leave, though. They do feel like that he'll be staying with Joe Gibbs Racing long-term, and I think for sure he'll be staying there long-term. But I think losing Kyle Busch with Toyota, I think we're already seeing the effects of losing Kyle Busch. I think that Toyota is going to struggle somewhat this year. I don't know if it will. I think they'll all make the playoffs. A lot of them will. And I think they'll win races. But their performance at Auto Club just wasn't awe-inspiring. It wasn't great. Christopher Bell struggled. And I think losing Kyle Busch is going to be a bad thing for them. But I think at the end of the day, we know Joe Gibbs wanted to keep Kyle Busch around, and they wanted him to be extremely successful. So I think Kyle Busch is going to continue to bring a lot of success to Richard Childress Racing long-term, do a lot of great things, and I think you're going to see a lot of great things from the Kyle Busch being at the team. So I'm excited for the long-term future for Richard Childress Racing. Kyle Busch is going to bring a lot to the team. I'm excited for it. I think Kyle Busch is going to win a lot of races, and we'll talk more about Kyle Busch this week, especially later today. So that is for today's Law NASCAR News and Motorsports News video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Notifications on to be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links are below that, and comment below your thoughts below on today's episode. What are your thoughts about Denny Hamlin's comments about Kyle Busch and Joe Gibbs trying to keep it? Let me know in the comments below. And do you think John Hunter Nemechek could be a potential possibility to replace Kevin Harvick this year? Let me know in upcoming year, I should say. Let me know in the comments below. Later today, we're going to have a video talking about Kyle Busch on how successful he could be at the team this year. Tomorrow on the channel, we're going to have 2 videos on the channel, the race picks, of course, for the South Point 400 and the paint scheme list as well. Then on Friday, we're going to have maybe 1 or 2 videos. There might be a special video out early in the day. And then, of course, we do have the truck review as well. Saturday, there's going to be double upload video on the day. And then Sunday, we will have the Cup Series race review for Las Vegas. And also, we got F1 and IndyCar racing, which comes back this week as well, that I'm looking forward to. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.